Hello, everyone. My name is Gabe Jimenez, and I'm a product marketing manager at Google working across all of Southeast Asia. I want to start off today by saying a big thank you to ASEC Jean Pacheco and the rest of the DTI team for being great collaborators on the MSME Caravan Mondays program brought to you by Grow with Google. This is week 5 in our session, and as you might remember, last week we discussed an introduction to Google Analytics. Google Analytics is a free tool to understand how people are coming to your site, what they're doing on your site, and the type of actions they're taking once they're on your website. In last week's discussion, as an introduction, we talked about some basic fundamentals like what is Google Analytics? How do you navigate some of the features in it? And how do you actually even set up an account to begin with? Because we know Google Analytics can be a little more of an advanced topic, we are dedicating a second session to it this week. Today's session will be a deeper dive into Google Analytics to address some of the advanced topics. Some of the things that we'll be going over will include things like a quick recap of last week's content on how to set up an account. We'll explain best practices on how to add a Google Analytics tag to your site and how to use the Google Tag Assistant tool to make sure that your tag is operating correctly. Next, we'll discuss how to understand and interpret the data that you see so that it can be more than data and actual insights for your business to leverage. And underneath all of this content, we'll also talk about the difference between metrics and dimensions and how do you actually navigate and understand all the different reporting functions within Google Analytics. And let me tell you, you are in good hands today because the main presentation will be delivered by my colleague Jonah, a longtime digital ad and skills advocate, especially for MSMEs. Now, for today's session, I do want to recommend that if you do have a Google Analytics account, that you actually have it open and use it to follow along throughout the presentation. So right now would be the moment to bring that up. To bring up your Google Analytics account, all you need to go to is a browser, and in the browser, type in analytics.google.com. Some of you might also use Google Analytics with the Google Analytics app, and that's okay. But for today, we'll be talking about the web experience. Again, if you can, we recommend that you go ahead right now and open up your Google Analytics account so that you can follow along while we're explaining some of the features. You go to analytics.google.com. If you don't have a Google Analytics account or you can't open yours up right now, that's okay. All the content will still make sense for you. No worries. Last quick thing to mention about today's presentation, for the sake of just today's presentation, we are using a Google Analytics account from a generic automobile retailer that's selling across all of Southeast Asia. I want to stress that although the data that you see in Jonah's presentation might be a little different than what you see in your Google Analytics account, the way that you will navigate and manage your account will be very similar, which is why we're just using this generic example. As always, we really appreciate your questions and want to make sure that you learn as much as possible. So if you have questions, please leave them in the Q&A functionality, and we will either respond to them via text or we'll respond to them live at the end. But enough with me, let's go ahead and let Jonah take it away and get you into some deeper dives around Google Analytics. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5th session of MSME Caravan Mondays, a Grow with Google program in partnership with DTI. Today, we will be talking about advanced website measurement with our Google Analytics platform, and it's a follow-up from last week's session on the basics and foundations of Google Analytics. First off, let me introduce myself. My name is Jonah, and I've been working in the digital marketing and advertising space for 7 years now. And I'm currently a senior partnerships lead at Google. And I'm very excited to be walking you guys through today's session. So we'll start off today with a brief refresher of last week's session on Google Analytics basics, really highlighting the key takeaways that will be important in unlocking the more advanced features of Google Analytics. So what is Google Analytics again? Google Analytics, or GA, is our free website analytics platform that is very easy to use and is the most widely adopted solution across the globe. It uses machine learning in the backend and is seamlessly integrated to our other Google products such as Google Ads. But what it really does is that it helps you unlock data-driven decision making when it comes to your different business needs. And if you don't have a Google Analytics account yet, it's very easy to create one. Just head on over to google.com/analytics and click that Start for Free button on the upper right corner. And it's going to take you 5 minutes to set up. All you have to do is input your business or your account name, create your property. So your property is basically your website. So if you have multiple websites, then you'll need to create multiple properties. Share a bit more information about your business, what category you're in, how big is the team, and what goals you're trying to achieve. And end with our terms of service agreement here. After that, you'll actually be given a tracking code that will need to input into your website. And this actually allows us to be able to collect anonymous data about your different website visitors, which really feeds into the charts and the reports that are accessible from your Google Analytics dashboard. So how do we find that tracking code? All you have to do is head to the lower left corner of your screen, go to the gear icon and click on that admin setting. Under GA Web View, there's a section called Setup Assistant, and just navigate to that tag installation page. There, you'll be able to select a website or an app option. So it's actually available for both, but for today's session, we'll focus on websites as a lot of the business owners will primarily be using that. Input your website URL, so that's your domain name. Make sure that the spelling is correct, and just click on Create Stream. After that, you'll be seeing the tracking code that will need to be inputted into your website. So there are actually two types. It can be a global site tag or a Google Tag Manager, but either one will work for your website. So we've set up the account, we've set up the property, and now we'll need to create a view. So the view allows you to look at the different aspects of your business, and you can create multiple views as well. And at the end of the day, these are really the main goals that we want to help you with. We want to help build your brand, generate more revenue, help sell your products, and really make it easier for customers to find you. And for us to translate these business goals into actual website goals, we'll need to set it up on Google Analytics as well. So it's going to be on the left-hand side here under conversions, goals, and you can set it up again on that admin section, and we have detailed instructions and steps on how to do so. If you want to learn more about the basics of Google Analytics, I do encourage you to catch last week's session. There's a recording that's available on DTI's Facebook page and YouTube channel so that you can really learn more and dig deeper into the basics and foundations before moving into the more advanced section, which we'll be talking about today.
All right, so let's head on to the main content of today's discussion on advanced Google Analytics. The first tip that we wanted to share is Google Tag Assistant. So we just talked about the importance of that GA JavaScript or GA tag or tracking code earlier, and how it's essential to how Google Analytics works. So whenever your website loads on any device, that GA tag actually fires and allows us to collect the data about the website, about the users, which is then sent to our servers and processed into understandable data that's reflected within your Google Ads user interface. So essentially, Google Analytics stores and processes that data that is sent from the tracking code tag on your website. So if you don't get the tag on your site correctly, it can lead to inaccurate data and not so helpful insights on Google Analytics. So again, this is where you can get the tag, and we have very clear instructions on how to properly implement it on your website. And if you're working with a website developer, check in with them to make sure that it is pasted into the header section of your web page. But for a lot of business owners, you might be using a third-party platform or solution. So most website building and hosting platforms actually make it very easy to connect to Google Analytics. So instead of having to add the code yourself, you just have to input your website property number, so G dash lots of numbers after that, into one of the settings sections. So we do recommend you to consult the help centers in case you can't find that particular setting, but it's something along the lines of website measurement or third-party integrations. These are just some of the partners that have this Google Analytics integration, but there's a lot more out there as well.
That's where Google Tag Assistant comes in. So you can just search for this really handy tool. You'll be able to download it as a Chrome extension. And then once that's set up, you'll see this really handy blue tag icon on the upper right corner of your browser. And when you click on that, it actually gives you a report of the tags on the website that you're visiting. So you can go to your website and double check if the tags are firing correctly. So again, that's Google Tag Assistant. You can just go to get.google.com/tag assistant for more instructions. The next step is all about dimensions and metrics. And it's really going to be very important for us to know the distinction between these two terms. So let's start off with metrics, which are really our quantitative measurements. So these are the numbers that we use to kind of count and compare against different items here. And some examples of metrics are sessions or your website visits. So these are the groups of interactions that people take on your website during a specific time frame. Users are also another example. And these are the actual people, the actual users that go to your website. Page views are pretty self-explanatory. These are the number of times that people have viewed different web pages within your site. And session duration refers to how long they were actually on your website. Here are a few more examples of some key metrics. So we talked about users, but there are also new users. So these are people that are really first-time users or first-time visitors to your website. And users can actually have multiple sessions, so they can visit your website multiple times across a specific duration. And you'll see that number on number of sessions per user. Pages per session is how many pages do they visit each time that they go to your website. And lastly is your bounce rate, which is the percentage of sessions with a single page view. So if someone lands on your homepage and they immediately leave, that will contribute to your bounce rate. So just a quick explanation on the differences between users, sessions, and page views, because it can get a bit confusing. But all you'll have to remember is that the user is the actual person. So that's going to be you when you go to your website. You are the user. And every time that you land on your web page, it starts a session. And during that session, you can actually go to different pages and contribute to a growing number of page views. So go to page A and page B. That actually means that you have 2 page views for one session for one user. But for example, you got hungry or you wanted to take a break, grab some coffee, and you left your laptop or your mobile phone after 35 minutes. That's when you came back and started browsing again. That's actually going to trigger a new session since there was that time lag in between. So for this particular example, this is actually highlighting 2 different sessions, 3 different page views, and 1 user. So that's all about metrics. The other term that we highlighted earlier is dimensions. And these are really the qualitative aspects of your website. So they're more of descriptors and really talking about the different attributes or characteristics of your website or your users. And key examples of this would be where your users are coming from. So it can be a country, a city, a region, which traffic source they came from, so which channel that is, whether that's on social or another website or on Google search, what browser they used. Was it Chrome? Was it Firefox? And what operating system they used, Windows or Mac. And these dimensions can really be used to segment different groups of data. So for example, for country, a lot of your website visitors might be coming locally from the Philippines, but you'll be surprised to see that there might be some visitors coming from abroad, like the US, Canada, or France. And when we combine that with the metrics that we discussed earlier, it really gives us a good picture of what is happening on the website. So for this example, we can see here that majority of the visitors are actually from the Philippines, but there's a pretty sizable chunk coming from Canada as well. And for visit duration, surprising to see that the people from France are actually spending the most time on your website. And what's interesting with dimensions is that you can actually layer them on top of each other. So if you wanted to learn more about the country that they're coming from, but also the channel or the traffic source where they came from, then you can layer those two dimensions on top of each other and see the breakdown of each one. So it's really, really a powerful tool that allows you to get into the nitty-gritty details when it comes to your website data. And that's really the key importance of dimensions here, being able to mix and match them together to form very specific audience segments that you want to focus on and that you kind of want to understand a bit better. All right, let's move to the last section, which is all about interpreting and analyzing reports in Google Analytics. There are actually 4 key reports, which we call our ABCs of GA. And the first one is all about audiences. Who are your customers? Who are the people visiting your website? Second is acquisition. Where are they coming from? How am I generating my traffic? Third is behavior. How do they interact with my website? What is their journey? What exactly do they do? And lastly is conversion. Did they take an action? Did they download my catalog, add something to cart, or even check out on my website? And today we'll be focusing on the first 3 on audience acquisition and behavior. So the first question that a lot of you might be thinking of is, who exactly are my customers? Who are they? And that's going to be primarily answered by our audience report. And you can navigate to your audience report on the left-hand side. It's going to be the second item under that report section. And the overview page will show you a lot of really good information already. So the metrics that we talked about earlier, like users, average session duration, page views, and whatnot, are all easily viewable here on this particular page. And you can also dig a lot deeper into the sections here, such as being able to identify the demographic or the geographic profile of those who've converted on your website. So if you wanted to know like what age these people are, you can just head on over to demographics and age, and you can really segment it to those people who were booking, for example, a test drive on your site. So for this particular example, the biggest chunk of users are actually aged 25 to 34, and they form 30% of the total users who booked a test drive on the site. So really, really interesting to know that information. You can also do it for gender. So there were more males who booked that test drive. And as we talked about earlier, you can layer those 2 dimensions on top of each other by adding a secondary dimension and being able to expand that data even further. So it's not just 25 to 34, but it's actually specific to 25 to 34 females that were booking the most number of test drives. And interestingly enough, that 45 to 54 male segment actually had the highest likelihood or the highest conversion rate of booking with you. You can also check the location where your users are in. So for this one, most of the users are really coming from Thailand here. And you can drill that down even further on a regional basis, the provinces, or even on a city level. So really, really helpful insights, especially if you're looking to expand your business to new locations. Another interesting segment under audiences would be interests. So if you're curious to find out what your customers are interested in, what they're doing online when they're not on your website, then the interests segment will be giving you a lot of that information. Stuff like the affinities that they're interested in. Are they into food and dining, shopping, sports, beauty? But also whether they're in market for a particular product or service. And when we say in market, these are the people who are in the market for something. They're already actively researching about a particular product and are really in the final steps of being able to purchase it. So that gives you a lot of really good information as well. There's also audience behavior. So really being able to identify your new versus returning customers. Are these first-time buyers or are these my loyal buyers that I kind of want to engage with a bit more? So that actually answers a lot of the question when it comes to audiences or customers. The next report will primarily answer this question on where my website traffic comes from. So let's talk about acquisition. So similarly, you'll have an acquisition tab with that overview page with all of the key highlights there. One good chart to look at is your top channels. So that pie chart actually shows you that over half of your website traffic is coming from your display campaigns or your display ads. The next chunk will be from others. So these are items that we're not able to clearly identify. After that is paid search. So paid search ads on Google, Yahoo, or Bing. And then you also have organic search. So these are your non-paid website traffic. Direct is when users input your website URL directly into the search bar. And lastly is social, which refers to the likes of Facebook and Instagram. And these channel groupings are actually set up by default already. So you don't have to do anything else. You'll see this data trickle in. But you can actually also customize it if you wanted to do so. So how do we collect information about the traffic source that brought your users to your website? So as mentioned, these are the key default traffic sources within Google Analytics, but you can also customize your traffic sources by manually tagging them yourself. So if you, for example, you ran an email marketing campaign, sent it out to your customers, or maybe had a social media campaign, or you've worked with partners, so you might have like affiliate links or influencers that you tag. You can actually manually tag these users by using a manual tracking URL. So this is an example of how that actually looks like. So if you've seen these really long links with like UTMs and whatnot, that just means that they're being manually tracked on Google Analytics. And you can create your own manual tracking URLs by just searching for URL Builder, and you'll be able to see a lot of different tools that can help you out. But basically, what this means is UTM source. That's just the source or the website that your traffic is coming from. So in this case, it's LinkedIn. The medium is that type of channel. So that's social referral. And the campaign is just an identifier for you to make it a lot easier to know what campaign type that was. So you can customize that any way you want. And once that's set up, you'll just need to input it into the channel grouping section that we saw earlier. So again, this is going to be on your admin tab. So lower left icon, click on admin and then channel grouping. And then you can customize it accordingly. And you can even create new channels. So for example, you had a marketplace store, you had a Lazada or a Shopee Mall, and then you can definitely edit the settings there as well, even change up the colors if you wanted to. So acquisition can also answer that question on which channels actually bring me the most engaged traffic. Where are my most valuable users coming from? So for this one, all you have to do is head on to all traffic, channels, and then sort it by your average session duration. So that's also a really neat trick. You can actually change the order of the different metrics here by just clicking on that header title at the top, and it'll automatically arrange it in an ascending or descending order. So for this particular one, we're taking a look at average session duration under behavior, and that's telling us that people from organic search are actually spending the most time on my website. So they're the most engaged and they're the most interested in my products. And we can also take a look at it on a goal completion view. So these are the people who downloaded my brochure the most, and they're actually coming from paid search with a really significant lead versus the next line item here. So that just means that people coming from paid search are really, really valuable for my business because they're showing great interest in my products, even downloading a catalog or maybe filling up a form. The last report that we'll be talking about answers the question on how users interact with your website and why are they leaving. So the behavior report is also a really interesting section within Google Analytics. And similarly, you'll have that overview page that will show you your page views, average time on page, bounce rate, and even exit rate. So one key question here is like, what are the most popular parts of my website? So your website might have a dozen or even like hundreds of different pages for the different products that you have. And if you wanted to find out what users are most interested in, you can actually sort it down here on the all pages section under site content and just arrange it by sorting page views. So for this particular example, it talks about offers/offers Mazda 3, which is the most visited web page. After users land on your website, you might be curious on how they move through it. Do they go to other sections? Where do they drop off? And that's the next bit on how do visitors flow through my website. So behavior flow is actually one of my favorite visualizations within GA because it really shows you the user journey in a very clear way. So it starts off with your landing page or the first page that users land on, the first page that they start or visit on. And after that, you'll be able to see what was the first interaction. Did they go to a different website section? And what did they do after that? And what's interesting here is that you can actually highlight a particular user journey. So you just click on one of the buckets and click on highlight traffic through here. And it will automatically show you that user journey here. And what I normally like to look at would be this drop-off rate. So if you see this huge red section on that first starting page, it actually shows you that 97% of people will drop off or will leave your page after they land on it initially. So that just really gives you like a good indicator of why my website is performing that way. Is there something that I can fix or that I can address? Are they able to find the specific information, or am I clearly stating what I want them to do? So that's behavior flow. All right. So those are actually the three main reports within Google Analytics, and we were able to highlight some of the questions that we can answer by going through each particular report. So we started off with our audiences, who is coming to my website, who are my potential customers, and what can I learn about them. Then we talked about the acquisition report. How do they arrive at my website? Where are they coming from? And how do they learn about me? And lastly is our behavior report. What do they do once they're on my website? What steps or what are they interested in? And how do they move through that user journey? So I hope that today's discussion was really helpful in addressing the key questions that we want to answer with Google Analytics when it comes to the different aspects of your business. But if you are keen to learn more, we do have a bunch of other resources for you as well. First up is Google Primer, which is our educational app, which is available for both Android and iOS. So they have a lot of really interesting topics here about business and marketing, and there's a dedicated section for Google Analytics as well. And they're really bite-sized and easy. So if you have 5 minutes, it's a great way to be spending that learning new things. So head on over to yourprimer.com and download the app. But if you're looking for something a bit more advanced, we also have Google Skillshop, which is our online training platform. And we have a lot of e-learning modules here, everything from the most basic to the most advanced. And you can even become certified for the different products that we have within Google. So that's skillshop.withgoogle.com. And that brings us to the end of today's presentation, wherein we introduced you to the more advanced aspects of Google Analytics. We hope that you found the content and the resources that we shared helpful, especially when it comes to understanding your data better, being able to unlock insights that will ultimately help your business grow even further. We know it's a lot of content, so please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A section, and we'll try to answer as much as we can today. And if there's anything that you missed, the session is recorded and will be available to rewatch later on DTI's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Again, big thank you for joining me today, and I hope you found it a great way to start your Monday. Have a great week ahead, everyone. Take care.